Hello, Year 8, and welcome to our first lesson of remote learning. So, to start off with, we are just going to be doing video lessons where you click on them and you complete your assignments as we go through, and hopefully, we'll be able to get to live teaching eventually. But for now, we're going to start today's lesson. So, you've already got the video up and running. It's important that you have your assignments document open as well, if you can, and you need to be filling in your answers on the assignment, and then at the end you need to make sure you submit it. If you're struggling to get on assignments, then what you can do is you can write your work on a piece of paper and you can submit the assignment and just say that you've done it on paper on the assignment when you go back later. So if you are just watching along on a phone, please make sure you're completing the writing as well. So today we're looking at what did Paul Stevenson and Al Sharpton do for civil rights. Now, Al Sharpton is an American and Paul Stevenson is English. So to start off with, I'd like us to think about the word multicultural. In one sentence, tell me what the word multicultural means. If you're not sure, you can do a bit of research online and you can pause the video and you can go and find out. Once you've done that, I'd like two more sentences. Is Britain multicultural? Would you say Britain is multicultural? And secondly, is America multicultural? Okay, pause the video for about 4 minutes to get that written down, and I'll see you in a second. Okay, so multicultural is when a country contains, there are lots there's a variety of cultures and ethnicities within a society. Okay, so a mixture of different cultures and ethnicities within one society. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone is the same, but it also doesn't mean that everyone is different. So a society is made up, or culture within that society is the blending of all these different cultures and ethnicities. So England is a multicultural country because there are lots of different cultures that make up what it is to be British, and those are changing regularly depending on who's living in Britain. And we have kind of really traditional British culture, but that has been heavily influenced by new cultures that have arrived through migration. America is very similar. It is a multicultural society. There are lots of different people that live there. However, you could make a judgment about which one kind of lives more harmoniously, which one is a better multicultural society. Britain is, although there have been issues highlighted recently in things like the Black Lives Matter movement, you could also suggest that it is more multicultural than America, especially cities like London and Birmingham and Leicester, where there are large groups or large different communities live side by side, and they do so very well. So let's have a look at Paul Stevenson first. We're going to look at him. He was the British political activist. So first of all, we need to look at what racial discrimination was like in the UK. And there was a huge amount of racial discrimination within Britain after the Second World War. So this was from 1945 onwards. So about 80 years, almost 80 years ago now. Many of the immigrants who arrived were skilled workers, but racism and discrimination meant that semi or unskilled work was the only option. So Britain needed a lot of people to come and work on the rebuild after the Second World War, and it looked to invite migrants from different countries to arrive, but it wasn't willing to give those migrants high-paying, high-skilled jobs. Instead, a lot of those migrants ended up in unskilled labour. By the 1960s, the economy in Britain was declining again, and black workers were the first to lose their jobs. So quite often in these in this work environment, you were treated very differently from those who were seen as white British. If you were black, you might be the first one to lose your job. You might not get paid as much as other colleagues. You might even struggle to get a job if you're applying for it. Those that did manage to keep jobs usually did double the work for less pay. The racism and discrimination in Britain echoed that felt in America at the time, although on a smaller scale. So this was happening at the same time as Martin Luther King was fighting for the rights of voters and the rights of employment within the United States. So there were a number of black people who made a difference to the civil rights of the black population in Britain, and one of them was Paul Stevenson, who in 1963 led a boycott against a racist public bus company. The Bristol Bus Company operated a colour bar that refused employment to blacks or Asians. So first of all, I'd like you to tell me, what is a colour bar? I want you to pause the video there for 2 minutes and you try and think of what that could be. Okay, so a colour bar is like a barrier. It's a barrier that stops people from doing something, okay? So in Bristol, it meant that there was a colour bar by the bus company, and the bus company didn't want black men working on the buses. So the colour bar stopped black men from getting jobs on the buses, and those were the good jobs in the city. So a colour bar is quite simply when you are stopped from getting a job or being able to live in a particular part of the city because of the colour of your skin. And that's what existed in Bristol. And Paul Stevenson did not like this colour bar, and he took on the colour bar directly. So there is a link within your assignments. What I'd like you to do, and it'll also be in the description of this video, I'd like you to watch the video about Bristol and the Bristol bus boycotts. And I want you to answer the 3 questions. Why did Paul Stevenson start a boycott of the buses in Bristol? What happened during the boycott? And how successful was the boycott? So I'll pause the video here and you can answer those questions for me. See you in about 5 minutes. So the boycott was started by Paul Stevenson because he saw how unfair the the recruitment was for jobs within the city, and he took on the Bristol Bus Company because they were the biggest employer within the city. He believed that the recruitment policy of only recruiting white labour was unfair. So at the beginning, he set up an interview for one of his friends, did not tell the company that he was a black man, and when he arrived at his interview, when the interviewer found out who it was, they quickly told the man that the position had been filled and that it was no longer a job. They then took that and started a protest. They stayed off the buses for a good amount of time, and eventually the city of Bristol had to end the colour bar. They had to start hiring whoever was applying for those jobs, so removing the importance of colour. So the bus boycott lasted 60 days. Thousands of people supported the bus boycott, and the news of racism made the headline. So huge amounts of black people from Bristol joined the marches, but also university students from Bristol as well, which supported the boycott, and it supported what was going on in the city. By 28th of August 1963, the bus company lifted the employment colour ban, and this was the same day that Martin Luther King Jr. made his I Have a Dream speech. So Paul Stevenson forced change, and he forced change in the interest of the civil rights of people within Britain. He changed the law to make it fairer for everyone. Mr. Stevenson would once again hit the headlines when he stood trial for refusing to leave a pub until he was served a beer. At the time, it was quite normal for pubs and restaurants to stop people from entering if they were a different skin colour. As it says there were often signs outside that would say no blacks, no Irish, no dogs, and they would quite literally stop people from coming in just because of the colour of their skin. So let's just summarise Paul Stevenson's success. Both cases helped to highlight the treatment of blacks and Asians in Britain during the period. The Prime Minister introduced tighter controls on immigration, but also introduced legislation that made racial discrimination a legal offence. So now, racial discrimination was against the law and you could be prosecuted for it. The Bristol bus boycott, was a success, and it marked the start of a lifetime of campaigning for Stevenson. He was regarded as a troublemaker, as he challenged racist practices in all aspects of life and strove to bring together black and white communities across the world. His work has been hugely influential, and as a result, he has been honoured. So, I'm going to do a bit more of a written task now. I'd like at least one paragraph on why Paul Stevenson is important. So you'll tell me why he's important. You'll support it with a fact, so you can talk about the Bristol bus boycott. And then I want you to link it back to the question. This makes him important because. So pause the video for about 10 minutes and complete that task on assignments for me. Okay, so that's Stevenson. Let's move on to Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton. So the Reverend Al Sharpton has made his name through standing up for equal rights of black Americans. He now hosts his own talk show called Politics Nation on Sunday mornings on NBC. He grew up in Brooklyn, New York. Once he graduated from high school, he immediately focused on helping black youth by founding the National Youth Movement to raise resources for impoverished youth. He was shocked following a shooting by a white man of 4 African Americans on the New York subway in 1984, where the shooter was cleared of all charges apart from carrying an unlicensed firearm. Sharpton led the first of many marches protesting this court decision. In 2014, Reverend Sharpton stood as a candidate for the US presidential election. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to complete the sentences in assignments or on a piece of paper. So Al Sharpton is A. He made his name by. He was inspired by an event to lead what? What did he lead? So pause the video there for 3 minutes and complete those 3 sentences for me. I will see you in a second. Okay, so let's keep going with this profile. In 1998, Taisha Miller was sat unconscious in a locked car with a flat tyre and the engine left running, parked at a local gas station. Her relatives had called 911 and the police soon arrived. According to their accounts, Taisha was having a fit. She was foaming at the mouth and shaking. When one of the police officers decided to break the window, she allegedly woke and clutched her gun, prompting officers to open fire, hitting her with 23 bullets. Sharpton participated in protests and as a result was arrested for his leadership of them. In retaliation, Sharpton called the lawyer opposing him Mr. Hitler. In 2014, Eric Garner was killed by a New York City police officer. The police used the chokehold as he resisted arrest for a crime he denied committing. With the officers pinning him down, he repeated the words, "I can't breathe," 11 times. The medical examiner ruled that his death was deliberate, a homicide. However, the jury of Richmond Court decided not to charge the police officer who held Garner in a chokehold. It was not until 2019, more than 5 years later, that Officer Pantaleo was fired from his job as a police officer. Sharpton organised peaceful protests to which over 5,000 people attended. This prominent role played by Sharpton in drawing attention to these tragedies and many others not mentioned here have led him to being described as ex-President Barack Obama's go-to man on racial issues. In response to George Floyd's murder, he also organised protests. So, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause the video again for maybe 4 minutes and to complete those sentences for me. Okay, so we're going to have a look at Al Sharpton's reaction to the George Floyd killing. So Al Sharpton gave the eulogy, a message of remembrance at George's funeral. We're going to watch it. So if you click on the link, and when you watch it, I'd like you to tell me what's the message of Sharpton's eulogy. And I will see you in about 5 minutes. So go and complete that, finish it on assignments, and then I'll see you in a second. So we can see that Al Sharpton is still influential in America today, but it's not without his criticisms. So we're going to read through how he inspires and how he doesn't inspire. And as we do that, I want you to complete the 2 sentences on assignments for me. So Sharpton inspires many people because his ability and willingness to defy the power structure that is seen as the cause of their suffering. A man who is willing to tell it like it is. He is willing to go to jail for African Americans, and he is there when they need him. President Barack Obama said Sharpton is a voice of the voiceless and a champion for the downtrodden. Sharpton, however, does not inspire because his critics describe him as a political radical who is to blame in part for the deterioration of race relations. Another reason why he does not inspire, Sharpton sees much of the criticism as a sign of his effectiveness. In many ways, what they consider criticism is complimenting my job, he said. An activist's job is to make public civil rights issues until there can be a climate for change. So, obviously these are opinions, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to finish the sentences showing the 2 different opinions, or the 2 different sides of the opinions that people have. So go to your assignment, and I'll see you again in 5 minutes' time. Okay, really well done today. Let's get to our final task. And our final task is, what did Paul Stevenson and Al Sharpton do for civil rights? So we're bringing it all together now. So I want you to complete 2 paragraphs in your book. Paul Stevenson was important to the advancement of civil rights in England because, and I want you to give me examples, and I want you to write 3 sentences. And then you want you to write 3 more sentences about Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton was important to the advancement of civil rights in America because, and I want you to give me examples, and again 3 sentences. So we can pause the video there for 10 minutes to get those 2 paragraphs completed, and I'll see you then. Alright, thank you very much for all your hard work today. Please make sure that you submit this via the assignments. Make sure you submit it to your teacher, and we will see you next week for some more history. Thank you very much for your effort today. See you then.